if you're someone who prides yourself on being a nice person, the source material we're looking at today has a pretty wild, maybe even provocative idea for you. It suggests you might actually be operating under a massive delusion. The text argues that just because you have an agreeable nature, the world absolutely does not automatically owe you respect. In fact, using some seriously fascinating psychological and philosophical frameworks, this analysis breaks down exactly why that accommodating, bend-over-backward nature might be the very thing harming your reputation. We are going to unpack this whole concept and really dig into the psychology of respect.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Do you honestly think that being nice gets you respect? Because the material we're analyzing today argues the exact opposite. It suggests that this belief is just a fundamental misunderstanding of how human dynamics actually work. According to the text, if you aren't being taken seriously in life, it's not because people are just inherently cruel. No, it's actually because of the subtle signals that you are actively putting out into the world every single day.
See, the reality of human dynamics operates a bit differently than we're usually taught. The text suggests that people can actually read your aura and your tolerance levels. It's like a sixth sense. They sense how you walk, how you talk, and most importantly, what you are willing to accept. By acting overly accommodating all the time, the argument is that you project this weak energy. The source posits that you're essentially making it abundantly clear that you don't demand respect, which inadvertently just gives others a free pass to take advantage of you.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the text introduces the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche to help us understand the deep psychological roots of this problem. And it's fascinating because he isn't talking about financial wealth here. He's talking about the supreme value of self-mastery. The analysis draws on Nietzsche to argue that the reason people might not respect someone is deeply tied to the fact that the person doesn't entirely own themselves yet.
Let's break down exactly what this concept of self-ownership actually means based on our source, with a little tough love. The text defines it as the ability to genuinely control your own mood, your behavior, and your standards. It argues that right now, way too many people let their environment dictate their worth. I mean, imagine a boss yelling at you in the morning and your entire day is just completely ruined. Or you face one minor rejection and you completely crumble. When your mood is totally tied to external circumstances, the text argues that a lack of self-ownership means other people are basically deciding your value for you.
To figure out why this happens, the analysis turns to the legendary psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. Freud believed that we humans unconsciously repeat our past patterns. The source describes this super common trap where we decide to just adjust to every bad situation. Maybe it's sleeping on the floor when guests arrive, or tolerating casual insults, or just staying silent when you really should speak up. By tolerating things you secretly resent, the text notes that you build up this massive well of internal anger. And here's the real tragedy of this pattern. Eventually, that hidden anger gets projected onto the people closest to you, your family, your partner, your friends, simply because they're safe targets.
So this profound lack of internal control and all that mounting resentment eventually manifests socially into what the source describes as the nice guy illusion. It's essentially just a persona. Someone might walk around thinking they are being genuinely kind, but the text argues it's actually just a defense mechanism. It's an illusion that masks an underlying inability to handle friction or tension in the real world.
The source maps out some very specific symptoms of this accommodating, weak energy. When the environment gets tense, cortisol levels spike and panic sets in. Instead of holding ground, the immediate reaction is to make these awkward little jokes just to break the tension. It's a tendency to soften up or to desperately try and fix uncomfortable public scenarios just to smooth things over. On top of that, the text points out that this often comes with a life lacking any real daily or hourly structure. Drifting through the day, talking big about building a business or reaching goals, but spending hours wasting time without any actual execution.
The source draws a really sharp contrast here. The strong are capable of sitting in silence and enduring tension. They can accept suffering without just breaking down. The weak, however, are described as constantly seeking escapes. When everything's get tough, they might plan a sudden trip to the mountains, turn to substances, or just distract themselves with endless entertainment. The argument is that they will do absolutely anything to avoid facing their own unstructured, messy reality.
All right, so how does the text propose we actually solve this? It makes a really fascinating pivot here, from the core problem to the path of gaining reliability. It argues that respect is not something you demand. Rather, respect equals reliability. It is earned through sheer, unbreakable consistency. The incredibly empowering takeaway here is that if you can be relied upon to finish what you start, people will inevitably take you seriously.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly the cycle that destroys that much-needed reliability. When the time remaining for a task is high and the pain is low, it's incredibly easy to engage in empty talk and draw up these grand plans on a whiteboard. But as time shrinks, execution becomes totally inconsistent. Finally, when time is practically out and the stress is agonizingly high, it turns into panic execution. The analysis shows how this cycle of delaying action until the pain is absolutely unbearable completely destroys any trust or respect others might have had for you.
We're bringing Nietzsche back in here, and he offers another heavy philosophical point to contextualize the struggle. Even self-hate has a structure. The text argues that if you structure your suffering, you can actually create something meaningful out of it. But the real trap is when mediocrity becomes completely normalized. When your routines are random and structureless and average outcomes are just accepted without putting up a fight, well, the source claims you lose all foundation for self-respect. The text goes on to explore what it sees as the harsh consequences of staying in this passive state, outlining a rather vivid societal timeline. It calls it the mediocrity loop. It suggests a pattern where at 22, someone might start a relationship acting entirely submissive and lacking ambition. By 27 or 28, the source claims they often get left for someone with a stable job who can actually provide and protect. And by 30, it describes a massive midlife crisis hitting because prime years were spent adopting that passive, nice guy persona instead of building a stable career, concrete skills, and real structure. It's a pretty compelling and brutal look at the potential costs of this mindset.
To break away from that miserable timeline, the text offers a practical solution rooted in the ultimate math of success, the 1% improvement rule. It's fascinating because this is where personal accountability really begins in the source's framework. It suggests we have to stop looking for these massive overnight transformations and start recognizing the compounding power of simply showing up every single day.
100%. That is a core message we are unpacking in this explainer. The math is simple, but undeniably powerful. If you show up every single day and improve by just 1% for 100 days, you achieve a 100% achievement rate. 200 days means 200%. The text argues it's not about grand, empty promises. It is about showing up daily and holding yourself fiercely accountable to that small, steady margin of growth.
But accountability rarely works in a vacuum, right? The source highly emphasizes the need for high-stakes accountability. This involves implementing a barrier to entry, like paying for access to a community. The text uses a really great analogy. Think of a paid buffet versus free food. When you pay, you take it seriously. You eat until you're full, and it filters out the non-serious crowd. The idea is that when you treat your interactions, your work, and your relationships as high stakes, it forces you to execute rather than just passively consume content.
So if you're stuck right now, the text argues it isn't bad luck, it's just a lack of a system. Consider the difference in these two loops. The motivation loop involves watching content, feeling super motivated, and then doing absolutely nothing. Conversely, the system loop is about joining an accountability group, applying real tools, and gaining real-world skills, like better speaking, business relations, and financial management. The underlying message here is that consuming information isn't enough. Execution is everything.
So, the crucial point the source makes is that transforming your situation is not simply a habit issue, it is a fundamental identity issue. The text posits that people will just continue to tolerate the same behavior and attract the exact same dynamics until a massive trigger event forces a shift. But interestingly, it suggests you can actually hack this mechanism by processing a new system, reinforcing a strong identity, and consciously evolving beyond mediocrity long before disaster strikes.
Let's summarize the core takeaway of this explainer. It is absolutely not demanded, it is not begged for, it is not negotiated. Respect is simply felt by others. People feel your reliability, your self-ownership, and your execution. The text's core argument is that you cannot negotiate respect, you can only emit it through your undeniable actions.
I want to leave you with this final, incredibly provocative thought from the material. We've explored the source's mechanism of mediocrity and the practical math of how it claims you can escape it. The choice it presents is entirely up to the individual. Will you take personal accountability, change your identity today, implement a system, and start owning yourself? Or will you wake up tomorrow and repeat the exact same pattern? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. The next move is yours.